Alright, welcome to Great Northern Cascade Division in N scale. We're going to try and make this a little bit of a shorter video than the first couple of videos where I was getting into a whole bunch of time lapses on getting the basement ready and building the first set of benchwork. There has been a bunch of progress the last couple of weeks, but it's all been kind of fiddly stuff. It's the exact same process. There's no time lapses and kind of construction montages in this one, but it's the exact same way of doing it. The faces for everything along here is 15 by 32 inch plywood ripped into 2.5 inch strips, and then it's 1 by 3 inch furring strips that are all the cross pieces. So as you see all the work that I've been doing, that's the materials that I've been using. Go and look at the last video where I showed how I built the first 300 feet of benchwork and how I put all these different sections together. But I've been doing a lot of work on the ends of the peninsula, what will be Hillyard, what will be the small helix to go between the second and the third level, and then just an absolute mess of work trying to figure out all the grades to get between the lower level and then the second deck coming through what will be the Cascade Tunnel. So please subscribe, like, follow along, hit notifications, all that crap that everyone says that you don't actually do. But if you want to keep in touch and see what's going on, then that's how you can do so. So thanks for watching. All right, so let's kind of come and start out in the area that I'm going to say is Hillyard, although it's really not going to be any kind of accurate prototypical representation of Hillyard. So let's just try and orient ourselves. The plywood empire here, the plywood's going to go west soon, but that's going to be where Spokane Station is going to be. It's actually going to go almost to the end of that module. So Spokane Station is going to come in here, and then we swing into what will be the yard maintenance area. So this is just going to be for locomotives. It's not going to be any kind of staging yard. It's not going to be any coach yard. Passenger cars wouldn't be coming in here and getting serviced, even though in the prototype they may well be. I just don't really have the space to do it. But this is an 8-foot edition. It's actually 6 feet of the straight edition, and then this brings it out. It's actually about just under 2 feet to end up being able to get the radius and still leave the separation. I think it ends up actually 3 feet diameter, and that was to try and give that 3-foot separation. So the plywood empire piece, it's going to get replaced with 2-inch foam, because what we're going to have is the two different sides of the station, kind of where this Code 80 Atlas track is. They're going to be up on the 2-inch foam because the river would have been running between it. And so we're going to keep it raised up 2 feet, but then along the back, and we'll switch over and show a little bit of the track plan, there'll be then a return loop that'll come down, drop down onto the lower level, and then start to climb back up again. Hillyard itself will then be raised up 2 inches to kind of match the height of where the 2-inch foam will be. Hillyard will probably be built on a plywood base to raise it up, because that whole yard area will end up being flat. There won't be a whole lot of elevation changes. But there'll be a diesel facility in there, there'll be a steam facility in there, there'll be a roundhouse. Right now I'm looking at a 6-stall roundhouse, turntable, things like that. So there's still more work that will end up, going into here, but at least the main part of that benchwork is done. And then just hanging out above that is a 3-foot by 3-foot section. That's going to hang out and probably be where the helix is going to be to go between the second and the third level. Haven't figured out exactly how many turns it's going to be. I think it's going to end up being 4 turns. So the train is going to be in there for a little bit longer than I wanted. And I'm a little bit torn because I've got this entire run of 32 feet along the middle section. And this is mostly going to represent coming into Monroe, and then coming through Monroe, and then we climb up, and then we'll be able to come into Everett. So really this entire middle deck in the prototype would be flat. And there would be no elevation changes, it would all be coming through on the flat. You've pretty much done your descent down the hill from the Cascade Tunnel, and by now you're pretty much on the flat. So I don't really want to have a climb. I might do a gentle 1% grade, and then I've bumped the helix up a little bit just to try and get, trying to cheat a little bit, gain some elevation, just so that the helix isn't having to do a whole bunch, because at least for this last 8-foot section, I'm going to be climbing. So I might do a gentle 1% grade most of the way along here, hopefully not enough that you would really notice it, just to try and cut down on how much the train disappears into a helix. And what will end up happening is there will be probably some kind of overpass. In the modern day prototype, Highway 2 goes underneath what becomes Highway 522. And so I'll have something similar where essentially the railroad will go underneath some kind of road bridge. There isn't really anything back in the time that I can think of that would have been there, but the railroad will disappear behind something, and what will end up actually happening is the fascia will come and wrap around this so you won't see it. Gives a little bit of a break, the trend then goes away, the whole trend disappears, and then the trend will come out on that top section. So that's kind of what's been going on down in here. A little bit of work, a little bit of fiddly on the end, and once the fascia goes in and curves it all the way around, it doesn't quite look as what you'll see all the way around on some of the other sections.
Let's look real quick at what I'm calling Hillyard. Again, it is not at all an accurate representation for the prototype. This is just what I am saying I am going to be using for my kind of yard and maintenance facility area in the Spokane area. And so I'm loosely calling it Hillyard because Hillyard was around there. But really, this is all driven by coming out of Spokane Station. I need to have certain length for the platforms and then distance between the platforms. Remember, we're going to pretend that this is more Northern Pacific Depot, even though it would have been 3 or 4 blocks over this way. And actually, this was the Union Pacific Depot where Milwaukee came in, but I'm going to play a little bit, take a little bit of liberties there. This is going to be a little bit more of an accurate representation of the Great Northern Depot, and so the river that we're going between them. And so then on that east end, you would have had the 2-track steel bridge that would have then taken it off the island. This is where it then starts to get a little tight and starts to really come away from the prototype. What it ends up coming, I need to figure out a way of doing double crossovers to be able to get into this Hillyard area. Now, it's not really going to be a coach yard, so the passenger cars aren't going to have anywhere to come in. It's not going to be an area where we'd have any kind of staging for freight cars or anything like that. Most of that is going to be in Wenatchee, which again, every model railroad is all about compromises and constraints, and so I'm trying to do the most that I have in the area. I would liked, in an ideal world, to have had some of that going on here, but just not going to be possible. So we are a little bit constrained, but what I want to try and get across is some kind of diesel facility. So you come through a washing facility, into refueling facilities, and into probably a 2-stall diesel shed, but I believe it's actually double deep. So you could technically get 4 diesel locomotives into it. Do then have a crossover to get over onto this section to be able to go into the turntable and then get into the roundhouse if needed be. Also then have a line coming off that would be more of the steam facility. So just very loosely I put in where you'd have ash pits, coaling and water. And again, you would come down to that turntable to come out on that departure track. Do also have a couple of supply tracks that are coming off that would be able to bring in oil, fuel, water, coal, different things like that. And one that would then come over to the machine shop and the backup. So this is just a very rough idea. This isn't necessarily perfect. The kind of odd track that goes underneath is I haven't figured out how to correctly represent 3D, but basically the majority of the track is all going to be 2 inches raised up. This track that's then coming away off this turnout is going to be for the reversing loop. So down here we're going to start to go down, 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 and then down, 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 and hopefully we kind of run around the side and end up underneath as we then come around and complete it. I haven't quite figured out the angles around here, but figure out somewhere the reversing loop would actually probably come more around here so that we can do that reversing loop at the height of the bench work. Everything else is going to be raised up 2 inches, the same way that all of this platform area will be raised up 2 inches. So like I said, very rough. This is somewhat close, I think, to what I'm doing. This is the 4th or 5th idea that I had. I had the roundhouse over on this side. I had the diesel facility over on this side in various different revisions, but I think this works out, and it's really just the radius of the curves in here because I've got to try and maintain 3-foot clearance over here because I've got an electrical panel and I have an egress window, and then I really want to maintain, again, 3 feet, 36 inches up here so that we'd have access all the way around for stuff. So I could get a little bit tighter, but somewhat the building code, somewhat for my own personal safety, I want to make sure that I do maintain those. So this makes it a little bit shorter, and so I've got to kind of extend down as far as I can to be able to get the radius, even though it's mostly just going to be locomotives. I want to make sure that we're not getting too tight as we come through here and it still looks okay. And then this can be a little bit more scenic, maybe put in a hill just to make it a little bit different. But that's loosely what we're looking at, and that's why what I'm calling Hillyard maybe looks a little weird when you see it. Hillyard would have been way longer than this, and you would almost have progressed through it, rather than saying I come up and then I come back into the roundhouse and then I come back into the machine back shops. They would have all been almost in a big long line, and depending on what you want to do, you could peel off to it, and they would have had freight yards off to the side, and they probably had passenger coach yards off to the side as well. So this is loosely what I'm looking at, just to give some kind of an idea, but there's still more thought that's going to go into this. The same with the passenger station area. So this is actually pretty close to what I think the passenger station area is.
All right, ends of the center peninsula then. So if we remember on the center peninsula piece that we looked at on the last video, the lower deck is 48 inches wide, and then the second and the third level are 40 inches wide. There'll be a skyboard that runs down the middle, right where that kind of 2x4 stud wall is hanging out. But on the ends of the peninsula, partly to kind of give a little bit more radius on the curves and just to visually break up what would otherwise be 24 feet of straight fascia, they do kind of come out a little bit. So this lower section actually ends up coming out to 5 feet in diameter, and then the second and the third level pop out to being 4 feet in diameter. So like I said, that's mostly just to give a little bit of a bigger radius of curve. The railwood will be set back probably a couple of inches or so, 3 inches from the edge of the actual benchwork and fascia, but we'll still end up somewhere in the region of, on this lower level, 26, not quite, 23, 24 inch radius probably. And then on the upper section, it'll probably be right around a 20 inch radius. So it'll still be nice. The 2x2 that's kind of supporting the levels up, you didn't really need it, but I wanted to kind of put it in there because there is a little bit of a weight of wood, but it is actually fairly solid and holds itself up. Don't know if the 2x2 will actually stay there. It kind of comes out a little bit further than I would like, but the skyboard is kind of going to come around where they are anyway, but I may end up swapping that into a 1x3 4-inch strip or something and probably bringing it back just ever so slightly, but it works. And so then again, over on the other side, you'll see how, we've kind of got some angle pieces that are coming away to start to bring it out into what will be that broader radius. And again, you kind of go with the straight lines on the 4-inch strips and plywood, but by the time the fascia is in, that'll take that away and it will curve quite nicely around there. And this will pretty much all be on the flat. This will all end up being scenic, but this is kind of a nice way to, like I say, rather than just having it come straight down and do a 180 and go away, just to add a little bit more visual interest by popping it out and giving us a little bit more radius on the coast. Right, so in the middle part here of this center peninsula, one thing that I'm still looking at adding in is probably some cross pieces. So these are, well, the lower section is 48 inches across, the middle and the top deck are 40 inches across. Skyboard will run down the middle, but it's still kind of long spans to go without any kind of cross pieces coming across here. So these ones aren't too bad because they're on the 2x4s, but these middle ones are more the ones that I'm concerned about. There is a little bit of flex to them. I think it would keep the sub road bed in fine okay, but I'm probably just going to put some cross pieces through. And then one thing that I haven't done yet on any of the bench work yet is then start to actually drill so many holes where all of the wiring will go through. What I think I'm probably going to do is build some kind of little jig that, will go on the side, probably as a piece of plywood, where it will go on the side and anchor over and come down. And so then I can just, somewhat quickly drill 3-4 holes through it, every cross piece, so that I can run the DCC bus, the DC accessory bus, Loconet bus, all this kind of wiring. And so there's a lot that needs to get drilled through. It's going to get kind of messy, but didn't want to do it as I was going through and cutting everything until I kind of figured out, okay, where are all the pieces going to be, roughly where's the track going to be, because some of the track is going to be further back rather than forward, and you don't want to have a whole bunch of long feeder wires necessarily going out to the track for the power. So Now that I've pretty much got all the bench work done, I need to go through and do all of that. That'll be a job that'll be coming up soon, kind of as I'm planning out how I'm going to do all the wiring. Alright, so bulk of the nonsense though, at least for the last day or so, has been on this section. And so on the lower section, this is coming through the Cascade Tunnel. Upper section, that's going to kind of be a turnaround after you come from Seattle. So let's try and orient ourselves a little bit. We'll start with the top deck. Seattle station is going to be around here on the top deck. And we'll come around the top deck. And even though it might not be perfectly on the prototype, probably is putting in the Seattle dock somewhere around here. Just Port of Seattle, just around where the modern day football, baseball stadiums are. And really that's just to kind of add a little bit of a visual interest. What will happen is the track itself will come around, the skyboard will be popped out 4 inches from the back or so. And so the track will go behind the skyboard, and then we'll end up coming around and basically making a turnaround to come back around, and then around here we'll probably close that reversing loop through a turnout back into Seattle station. So just to add a little bit of visual interest. This ended up being a little bit tighter than I had originally thought. I was wanting to see what the lower level looked like by the time we actually put everything in place. So right now that upper level is 30 inches across, and so we'd end up somewhere around about a 13-inch radius, which should be fine for the passenger cars, 85-foot passenger cars, you know. But I think what we could still do is probably pop this out a little bit and make it more of a complete circle going around rather than just curving this flat and then starting to go back. So we can probably gain another couple of inch on the radius of those curves. The low level is where it starts to get exciting. This is going to be mostly all hidden away and scenic in the Cascade Tunnel area. And so let's again try and orient ourselves on the lower level. We'll come around the curve here and we'll come into Leavenworth. And then I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to have anything between Leavenworth and where we come into the tunnel. I might. I haven't decided yet. But at some point, we're going to start climbing, coming out of Leavenworth somewhere about 1 to 1.5%. And so by the time we come over here, we've actually probably come up more than 2.5 inches. But what I've done is I've started to stagger the bench work all the way around, kind of like I had done over on the other side with the Helix on that 2nd to 3rd level. Because this is going to be an elevated road bed, you know, why keep doing 4, 5, 6 inch rises if we can just raise the whole benchwork section, and then it becomes a 2 or 3 inch riser, even though from where you started you've gained those 4, 5, 6 inches in total. So doing the math, it kind of depends on how much I want to start climbing out of Leavenworth, what kind of grade I want coming out of Leavenworth, how far down the peninsula Leavenworth is in terms of when we would start climbing. But we'll be climbing, coming into this section. And the idea is that the tunnel portal will probably be somewhere around here. Not entirely sure. I'd originally thought over here, but it seems kind of a waste. So the tunnel portal will probably be around here, so you get a little bit more view of the trains. And then the road itself will probably then come around here. We've now stepped up again. We'll come around in a big arcing circle, and we'll probably do a 2-turn helix that will be hidden. And then on this middle deck, there'll probably be another module that will come out, so we can start to curve our way back off the helix. So we'll complete probably 2, maybe 3 rotations on the helix, come back in, move around, and by the time we get to here, we should then be back up at a point where we can have rises coming in normally about 1 to 2 inches above the height of the deck. We do have quite a way to climb. We have 17 inches between that bottom deck and the middle deck. I didn't want to just completely disappear into a helix. That would end up being 7, 8 turns, maybe more. This is pretty big. It's 4 feet in diameter, so we'll end up somewhere like a 22-inch radius helix to move around. So we'll end up being long, and I didn't want to disappear completely into this helix. Operators don't really know what's happening. They can't really see what's going on. I didn't just want a massive helix hanging out in here that's 15, 16 inches tall. So I think this will work out okay. In theory, it sounds good. On paper, it kind of looks like it would work. We would come around into the Helix for 2 or 3 turns and then come back out again. And so then, you know, this whole section here would just be a mountain. So the idea would be is you're following the train around, you see it climbing, you see it climbing, you see it going to the Cascade Tunnel, and then there'll be a whole bunch of scenic area around here that would kind of catch your attention that you'll be able to look at. The United Northwest Model Railroad Club that I was a part of out in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle area, they kind of had a little game almost for kids. It was kind of like a finding game where on the modules they had hidden different things. They had hidden a little campground or some bears or some deer or whatever else, and so you had to find these little things. And so what I thought was in this big mountain area, I would have all these little things that would be dotted around to kind of catch your attention, so that you're not just kind of hanging out waiting for a train. Now, when you've done this 3, 4, 5 times, maybe you lose interest and it's not quite as exciting. But I think this will be quite a visual feast. It opens it up, it gives a huge amount of space for a mountain area, and then again the train would continue to come around on that second deck and come out of the portal probably somewhere around here, and then we're back on the flat as we come around, drop down into Skycomish, something like that. So, like I said, a whole bunch of work has been going on. A lot of it has been centered, you know, over on this side. There was 2 of the airfoot modules came in. There was all of that came in. There was then the turnaround piece up on top there for Seattle. So now it's starting to really look like something. Put in some LED lights over on this workbench area as well. So now I can start to do a little bit more work down here on some models, start to work on some of the buildings that I had put together, start finishing up a couple of passenger cars. These were a couple of Concours passenger cars and then brass car sides that I've cut and put on. I need to get them primed so that I can then start spraying them up. But they will be, I think, the final couple of cars for the Big Sky Blue Empire Builder that I've been working on. Everything else is done. Got a couple of the locos already done, one of them custom painted too. But other than, I think, the Superdome car that was from Centralia Car Shops, all of those other cars are custom painted. So altogether, coming up pretty good. I'm going to call it an end of this video here just to try, in an effort to try and keep it somewhat short. So now that we've got this done, I think what I'll probably start working on next is this area over here. Try and actually figure out where Spokane Station is going to end up going, get some of the 4-man rough in some of the track, and then the same over here for Hillyard. I've got a rough track plan that I shared a little bit earlier. Try and, you know, finalize that, get that a little bit more concrete, and start to figure out, okay, how am I going to raise that up? How are we going to then get the track to start to drop down, come around, complete the reversing loop, and then get back up. So thanks for watching and following along. Let me know in the comments what you think, any ideas and suggestions. It's been good from the last couple of videos here from different people that have found the channel and enjoying following along. This is very much a work in progress. There's a lot more to go on. I'm going to say that the majority of this bench work is done at this point. There's going to be little things along the way that are still going to come in. There's still obviously all the fascia boards, but this is the majority of the bench work now done. I think from the last video we were at about 300 feet total in bench work. I think with adding in the additional modules and all the different turnaround sections and the end of the fascias and whatever else, the end of the peninsulas in lieu of the fascias going in, I think we're probably at about 400 feet now, somewhere like that. So it's right around where I was expecting it to be, and then with the track kind of, you know, weaving a little bit backwards and forwards and going through the helixes, we're probably still going to end up right on somewhere like 425, 450 plus feet of actual track. So I'll be back in a few weeks probably. I've got some work trips coming up. We've got some family trips and stuff coming up for birthdays at the moment, so I'll slow down progress a little bit. I wanted to try and get cracking and get this bench work done, so now I can kind of sit, pause a little bit, figure out some track work, start ordering some materials for that, and hopefully when we come back we'll start to see a little bit more progress on the actual layout itself, and not just looking at all of this bench work stuff. So thanks for watching. Take care. I'll be back soon. Bye.